Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this very special episode of ProLib Live. This is episode 4 of the Requiem for the GDC, and my computer is dead. About 20 minutes ago, we had a power surge, and my beautiful computer is dead, so we're on the backup. This is actually my streaming PC. This is what I use to just send the signal out. There's no graphics card in this. It's an older processor. What's up? Yes, I will send you the link. So we've got this whole, and the issue is I've got to use StreamYard for this instead of vMix like I'm used to. And StreamYard won't plug into existing scheduled streams.
Nah, you have to do it. No, yeah.
All right. So the stream that I had scheduled doesn't matter. It won't let me use it. Anyway, Nate, thank you for being here. How are you this evening?
I'm doing great. It's been one of those hot summer days here in the city. Let me move my mic closer so you hear me and less of the background noise. Yeah, but it's been a tremendously hot day today, and things are going well. You know how it is. You know, we're just talking about the YouTube life and how things go on YouTube. So it just, you know, I would say things are going as well as they could be, given the president in office and the conditions of the outside. You know, it's just we are where we are.
All about that. We can talk all about that. I got to send this link over real quick. So that's why we had to come up on a new stream instead of the stream that was already up, unfortunately, because my computer died. My computer ate itself. All right.
Let me tweet this out. Go ahead.
Yeah. Let's tweet it out. Let's get it out on Discord and everything. Give everybody a couple of minutes to get here. Because I know it's confusing. And I apologize, guys. I think it's a power surge, and I think my computer is dunsies. It's a black screen. The keyboard powers on, like it's a lit keyboard. It's a laptop. You know, it's not a desktop. And like when I turn it on, the lights come on the keyboard. I guess I could show you guys. I've got it right here. So when I turn it on, like the lights come on. Well, you probably can't see that, but the lights are on the keyboard. But yeah, it's just a black screen, perfectly black screen. The computer's on, hooked up the external monitor. It's black. Nothing. Yeah, I think I don't know if it's the processor. I don't know if it's the graphics card. I'm going to work on it later, you know, after the show. But yeah, that happened about 20 minutes before we were supposed to go live. So that's also why we're late. So I apologize to everybody. It just one of those freak things. Maybe I hope I can fix it. Because buying a new one, that's never fun. All right.
Oh no.
I think people are getting here, so we'll go ahead and start. And I'm going to start this the same way I started this when I talked with Saka, when I talked with Holy Spackle, when I talked with Chris Mowdy. How did you first come and find the great debate community?
That's a question I got to think about. You know, it was kind of like a folly of things, though, the way I found this group of people. You know, I remember at first I was kind of struggling with atheism and my place in the world, or whether I was going to really just come out as someone who didn't believe in the God concept, or if I was just going to kind of like, you know, still be kind of kind of a closet atheist, you know, because my family were believers and things of that nature.
Sure.
So the only time I really was introduced to other people who were open atheists were just online through YouTube. Because in real life, we just didn't, you know, you just didn't meet a lot of people. You say, do you believe in God? Somebody said no. If somebody said no, that was a shocking thing, you know. So you know, online, you see all these people saying no. So I started just watching videos. First, I just, you know, did a search of atheist in the YouTube search parameter, and they started giving me all different things. And I remember at first I was a fan of Bible Thumping Wingnut. I don't know if you ever heard of that show.
Mm-hmm.
And they used to have Matt Slick on every week. So I actually, if you can go back a while, you'll actually see me pop up on that show a couple of times to talk about religion, like really early on when they first started. This is before they got like 1,000 subs. I was on that show talking.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. God. Wow.
And the Magic Sandwich Show was hot at that time. And I remember the Atheist Experience. And I remember after a while, I was more into the atheist sect. I was like, yeah, this atheism thing just makes more sense to me. There's nothing on the other end. I feel like I'm just believing in bullshit now. But then I wanted to challenge my own beliefs, right? I was saying, well, I am an atheist, but I want to challenge my beliefs in the sense of, are there convincing arguments on the other side that can convince me that I'm wrong? But this is so I had been into the William Lane Craig. I don't know if you cite him. Bruggencate was really big at that time because he had brought out the presuppositional argument. So when I was looking for people for the counterpoints, I remember the first person I was introduced to on the other side was true empiricism, for the whole great debate community piece. And then I remember he was using eloquent language, but he just wasn't saying anything. So I was like, this guy just knows how to use, his vocabulary is great, but he just doesn't know what he's saying. It just doesn't make any sense. So then that's when I kind of went into the G-Mans of the world. And I was like, oh, okay. Because he's like, oh, my boy G-Man. I went to G-Man. I was like, oh, this guy's a maniac, but he was a maniac for God. And he reminded me of me. So then after, so then I saw attack video against true empiricism from Steve McRae. And then I saw a hate video about G-Man from Dragnot. And that kind of got me all into the whole, this. Then I remember my first hangout was actually a Steve McRae hangout. So I was, at that time, I remember I was chilling in my office and Steve was, it was Steve, Dragnot, a whole bunch of people in there. And they were just talking about something. So I just popped in and I was just like, they sent the link out. I popped in. But at that point, I was like a viewer of like Talking Shit Tuesday, but I had never just spoken to anybody. And then I popped into a Steve McRae hangout. He was like, what's your name? I'm like, my name is MP. And it just kind of went on from there. And that's when I just met everybody. And I'll say this, it was awesome. Like what Steve, and I'll even say what Dragnot, because it was really Dragnot from my recollection. It was Dragnot, Steve, Sam, and I believe Saka. Those were like the big names in the community back then. Those were like the people, if you wanted to get something, to do something, make something happen, you talk to those people, and these were the people that most people respected. Everybody said, hey, if you want to know something, go talk to Drag, go talk to Steve, go talk to JD. So getting involved with that crowd, it just was interesting. And I remember Steve kept saying that he wanted to build a bigger community because he liked the concept. And the concept was having just regular people talk to lay people, having the only time you spoke to anybody of any stature was if you went to school or something. But why not just be able to have everyday conversations with these people? And that's what Steve wanted to bring to the table. And Dragnot, taking it to the next level, Dragnot was like, yeah, we can definitely do this. Let's organize it. So all together they were working for this one common goal. And that's really what made me really fall in love with the community, because then it became a community thing. Next thing I'm talking to a PhD in philosophy. Like when I had an issue, hey, speak to this PhD in philosophy. What else could you do that? Hey, I'm confused about evolution. Speak to this biologist whose thesis was, in what is it called? The human chromosome number 10. It was like insane stuff. So just having access to that wealth of knowledge, and then offering my wealth of knowledge, which happened to be law, to it, it just seemed to be a really good fit. So I love the community, I love the people, and even though we all had personality differences, it really, really, really was just that type of thing where we all came together, and people would give you shit. Like I would say something and people would challenge you. You had to. The community was more about ideas and us being able to challenge each other's ideas. And that's what made the community really strong at that particular time, because there was no, I always say this, non sequitur stole the original great debate community's motto that all opinions are sacred, because you can come in there and say anything, but you had to be able to defend your position. And that's where people fell out, when they couldn't defend their position.
Agrippa says, that's a blast from the past. How many months did we try to get Ronnie to explain that?
Oh yeah. I remember what Drag typed it all out one time. It was insane. It's crazy. But I'm telling you, we had some such great times. I remember being on streams for 8 hours back then.
Yep.
Talking about nothing. We talking about nothing. And it was, I honestly feel where the community is at now from where it was before, it was so much simpler back then. You know what I mean? It was just so much simpler. It was so much simpler. So
yeah, and I think I've gotten that a lot from the first 3 episodes of this. Like, there was the community part of it was really strong. Brass tack seems to be the moment where things changed, and we'll get to that. But it seems like early on, it really was more about the community than the arguments.
Well, it's funny because I know now where everyone is at now. So, so things that I'm going to say, but looking back at it from that point in time, I think some of the best things that happened as a community were, number one, when Drag was setting up his organizational piece, because Drag was like the executive producer for a lot of the shows, for Talking Shit Tuesday, for Steve's stuff. Like, Steve would go to Drag to ask him, yo, we need to do this, we need to do this. So Drag was like the kind of the backdoor mastermind about how structurally everything went, because he was just so easy to approach. He was somebody that everybody could talk to. He was that type of guy. And Steve was kind of like the organizational piece. Like, Steve had the vision. Let's get the money. Let's organize this. Let's make the Great Debate community. Let's register it. Let's do this. And Drag was more or less on the people side of it. Hey, let's talk to the Alex Malpass. Let's have a conversation with this guy. And the community together, we all knew one thing. It wasn't about the argument that you were making, but whether your argument can survive the crucible of the Great Debate community. And that was what I miss most, because you can come with an argument, but if you couldn't back up what you were saying, you would get destroyed. And you knew that. And that was a quality of both Steve, Dragnot, Sokka was part of that. And a lot of people just couldn't handle that. So, and unfortunately, we lost a lot of Christians because that's what happened.
Sure. For you, it was more of the religious debates, but you also talked about like some of the more out of the box type of debates. When you think about some of what your favorite ones were, what was some of the favorite things that you talked about or debated over?
Well, at first I wanted to keep my profession like a secret. I didn't want people to know I was an attorney, because it's just like if you tell somebody you're a dentist, everybody's showing you your teeth, right? Hey, I got a tooth, check out my tooth. So I was like, I'll play that, I'm just not going to tell everybody I'm a lawyer. But a lot of the best debates happen to be with, from my perspective, when Steve had on, I think, Hovind, that was a really good one. Just about evolution. When Hovind debated Bill Ledlow, that was like another great one. And to be honest with you, it just like some of the best debates that we had probably are up on YouTube and nobody's ever watching them. Like debates I had. Like, I remember I've had 5 or 6 hour debates with Darth Dawkins, straight, cold, me in a room, 7 hot Christians hating on me. I'm the only atheist, and them trying to convert me on the spot for 6 hours. That's like the type of stuff. And I know it sounds insane. Like, damn, you were in a room with Darth Dawkins for 6 hours. But yes, 6 hours, and we used to do that like 4 or 5 times a week. Like, it was that type. Speaking of Ken Hovind, I remember the first time I spoke to Matt Dillahunty. It's a shame to say this, but there was really no one conversation that made it. It was the wealth of conversation, the wealth of people you were speaking to that really made the community what it was. And you got to give, and I have to say this, that is a testament to both Dragnot, to Sam the Scientist. It's a testament to Red's rhetoric and to Steve McRae. They all had a hand in building the community to what it was at that point in time.
Oh, I absolutely agree, and I think all 4 of them deserve that credit. Drag says, once Steve found out Nate was a lawyer, he concocted the idea to use him for any GDC trademark issues. Do you want to comment on this?
That's accurate, but okay. Some of the things that we talked about, obviously, I can't share.
Sure,
but yeah, we that was some stuff that we did, but I didn't have a problem with it, and Steve was cool with it. So,
do you know someone named Ocean Keltoy?
Mm-hmm.
I'm just kidding. Ocean's a friend.
Ocean, Ocean's one of the best. If you want to learn theology, I learned theology from Ocean. So watch his stuff.
No, Ocean's fantastic. Ocean's a friend of mine. But he said when Dee Dee showed up on the scene, things were a fucking mess. Can you talk a little bit about Darth Dawkins and messes he created?
Well, the two people who hate me the most online are Darth Dawkins and Steve McRae. And it's really for the same reason. It's because they tried to convince me that their argument was right. And I went painstakingly through every stitch, and I'm one of those idiots that researches almost everything. If you tell me something, I'm going to look it up. I'm going to research. I'm going to read what you give me, right? I'm going to read what you give me. I'm going to actually even go to the next level and speak to the person who wrote the damn thing, if I can, to try to figure out if I'm just that wrong, because I've been fooled before. You know, I was one of those Christians who my argument against evolution was, why the hell we still got monkeys? You know, are those the stupid monkeys? That was my argument. You know what I'm saying? That was my defeater for evolution. So with Darth Dawkins, my whole thing whenever I had a conversation with a Christian wasn't trying to convince them that Christianity was wrong. Like I specifically never tried to do that. I always tried to tell people why I didn't believe in it, and what evidence or what reasons do you have to believe in it. And if they're convincing, then I'll believe. But if they're not, then I'm going to tell you why I just don't believe it. So for about a year and a half, Darth Dawkins was on this mission to try to convert me to be a Christian.
I'm sorry. What did he do? Like, what did he try to do to convert? Like, what was his strategy?
Well, it was at first it was hostile, and it was just, you know, it was just like, you know, Nate's, you know, just doing his thing. But we had actually our first interaction was on Antonio Fletcher's channel. He was a pro-abortion guy, and Darth had come in. I didn't know who he was, so we were talking about it, and he went through his precept stuff, and it was like one of the first or second time I got introduced to it, so I kind of knew what was going on. So, but they didn't know I was an attorney at the time, so they started talking about abortion and what's it called? Roe v. Wade. Now, Roe v. Wade, I've read a whole bunch of times, right? I've read that case like at law school. I've read it after law school. Sure. I used to teach family law. Like I've taught family law. So Roe v. Wade is one of the fundamental cases in family law. Right. So I was just like, okay, well, Roe v. Wade. So Darth had made this proclamation that Roe v. Wade said nothing about the life of the mother. And at that point, I was like, what are you talking about? That's what the whole case is about, the life of the mother.
That's a key part, right? Like,
yeah,
that's part of it.
So we had this big argument. Him and Antonio said I didn't know what I was talking about. So then after that, I told Antonio, I was like, well, Antonio, I'm an attorney. And he was actually, if you look at Roe v. Wade, I said, just Control F and put life of the mother. And it said there like 10 times. So It was like my first debunking video, right? So Antonio then took me and then had me speak to Darth privately. And I told Darth, I was like, well, listen, I'm an open book, but if as long as you don't lie and say something is true, which is not true, and then they found that I was an attorney, and then Darth was like, oh, okay. And I said, that's the reason why I knew this case was, what you were saying was bullshit. But I didn't put into any malice. I just thought that maybe in the heat of a conversation, you forget, what I'm saying? And I thought that he forgot. So that's kind of where we started off with Darth. And me and Darth were friends. Darth is a huge Star Wars fan. So we talked about, and I am myself, we talked about Star Wars. We talked about politics. Like Darth was cool. Darth wasn't a friend of me. He was a cool guy who we had conversations with, who used to laugh about him destroying other people or saying he was destroyed. It was just that type of thing.
Right.
And then we had a conversation, but it was, I forgot the name of this guy. He was doing like 24-hour hangouts before, MK. And the downfall was MK asked me to mod his channel. MK used to fall asleep during, and he used to say, Nate, can you mod for me? So I was like, all right, I'll mod for you today, because I'm not doing anything. I'll mod for you today. Sure. So the day he asked me to mod, Darth Dawkins, and I remember he was doing his precept thing, and MK told me, he said, well, listen, make sure everybody gets a chance to speak. So so if Darth had tried to cut anybody off, I had to mute I had to mute Darth. So at one in a 5-minute period, I muted Darth something like 132 times because he kept trying to cut in, and it was like insane. It was like insane. So I was like mute, and then MK, being funny, he showed the whole thing, like how I had muted him like 130 something times in like a 5-minute period, and he put, Nate is actually an extremely fair moderator. I know this seems crazy, but this is actually what Darth does. And then from that point on, our relationship was just boom, because he expected me, because we were friends, just to let him run the conversation. But I'm like, MK told me not to let you do that specifically. So I kind of felt set up, but it was cool. And then we had one last conversation where I told him, kind of how I really feel. And, that kind of ended that. So
Pirates of the Deep Web says that's a slow day for Darth.
Yeah. It was insane how many times I had to mute him, but he just wouldn't stop cutting the guy off. And the guy was like, "My name is," and he was like, "Well, what up?" Mute. So,
I want to say too. I think I've said this in every episode. I appreciate everybody that says they love the series. Wasn't my idea. This was Drag's idea, and he gets full credit for this whole series, for the idea of this whole series. And I want to thank Drag for suggesting it, for suggesting I do this. This has been fascinating for me. I was kind of tangentially aware that a great debate community existed because I liked to go on the Flat Earth subreddits where people would argue about Flat Earth. And every once in a while I would suggest it, or somebody would link something, or that sort of thing. But I didn't. So I was aware of it, I guess. And then when I started to think about really establishing a YouTube channel, I worked as a social media manager for a while, and I wasn't allowed to be hyper political when I had that job.
of course,
And that job ended. And so I was like, oh, I've wanted to talk about politics on YouTube for a long time. I should start getting into that. And then I found that on Sequitur Show. And Steve, my understanding was that Steve was the head of the GDC, or the leader of the GDC, or the founder of the GDC. None of those things are technically correct. He says that it's the G+ page. Anyway, can you talk a little bit about how about the metamorphosis that occurred when he started to assume more control?
Well, I think it was, to be honest with you, I don't think it was. It started out as a community-based thing where we all, as community members, were coming together. And that's what we called the community, the Great Debate community. But Steve was someone who saw value in that. He saw there was an opportunity in that, opportunity to make money, opportunity for all of us to get to the next level in the YouTube thing. I think, especially with monetization coming on, Steve saw that. Steve saw the money making tools, the Patreon, this, and he understood that there was a real opportunity here. So what Steve started to do was organize things. Like, let's make this a G+ page, and let's kind of have everybody go here, and let's have this channel, the Great Debate Community Channel, and let's everybody do their stuff here. And all of these things were to hopefully, it's what they call a rising tide raises all ships. So it was kind of that mentality, let's all invest time, effort, and ideas into this project, and then everybody will raise up. But what happens is that questions started being asked. Like, all right, the new Great Debate Community Channel was monetized, but where was all that money going? It was just going to Steve. And then so you started having problems. And then when it came down to, well, who owns this, right? Who owns this? Who's the person who makes the final decision? That person was Steve. And so now we had a community that all of a sudden had a hierarchy. And that hierarchy, nobody voted on. It was just Steve and a close knit of people up at the top with Steve, that made the decisions for everybody. So it wasn't really a democracy, but it was kind of just fell out into that. And what happens is Steve then started treating it as his own. Like, this is now mine, instead of it being the community-based project that it was. So now he can make unilateral decisions. And that's what happened when we had our first falling out. He had made a unilateral decision that everybody knew was incorrect. And that decision was, if one person disagrees with me, I can excise them from the G+ page, from the community. And then everybody was kind of say, well, hold on, you can't do that. because just because somebody disagrees with you, because then that could happen to anybody, and you shouldn't have that power. And that was the first brick to kind of fall, and everything else started falling after that.
So, I hate that. I guess I don't hate that, but it pains me that Steve gets painted in this super negative light for what he did. And I made a joke I shouldn't have made. The way that I got started on this whole GDC thing, I was debating the Messenger reveals. Do you know who that is?
Yeah, I know Messenger. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I was debating him on my channel about something else unrelated. I'm not getting into that right now. And I made a joke, and I said, because we were talking about Steve, and I said, did Steve McRae kick Nate Broady and drag Knott out of the GDC because they were black? And it was just a joke. That's not what happened. I was just making a joke. I was just trying to rile the Messenger reveals up. Well, that night I had DMs from like 5 or 6 different people on Discord. They were like, if you want to know the real story, here's the real story. And then this other person said, well, if you want to know the real story, here's the real story. So what is the sequence of events that got you blocked and blacklisted out of the GDC?
All right. So first, before that actually happened, we had gotten really close, like myself, Steve, Drag, and I think this was after the New York. We all came to New York and had the New York thing happen. Or was this before the New York thing? I forget. But I know we were all pretty close in a group. Myself, Reds, all the people who now hate me. We were actually pretty close. And we were on the G+ page. And Steve was pushing his agnostic argument. Now, Steve has always had the issue of being called an atheist. Steve has always had the issue of being called an atheist. And Steve doesn't want to be called an atheist. Now, why he doesn't want to be called an atheist? Because Steve hasn't taken that next logical step to say, it's okay that I'm an atheist, right? He's one of those people who wants to be stuck in agnosticism forever. And he wants everyone else to accept his agnosticism through these means. So Steve was trying to put together his argument that really all the atheists are really agnostics and that everybody should be calling themselves agnostic. That was his thing. And it was a pretty convincing argument. But someone like me, when you start making those arguments and you give me things to read, like he gave me Draper to read for what's it called, for Stanford. So guess what? I actually fucking read the thing. Like I went and read it. I read it. Then I looked up the references and I said, well, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about, because if you just read it, it says this, but then it contradicts him. And matter of fact, the way he was using agnosticism was contradicted in the damn paper he was giving me to cite. It was like, he's using it wrong. He's not using it the way the damn paper even says you should use it.
I love that.
Yeah, the fact of the matter is the paper that he cited, the whole thing says, matter of fact, it rejected the way he's using it, only used it in the opposite way as a knowledge claim. So when I confronted him about this, I'm like, Steve, all the references you give me, matter of fact, say you're wrong. It says you're wrong. Then it was kind of like, well, go and talk to this guy, talk to this guy, and talk to this guy. So I'm talking to these guys, and then I'm like, well, you guys, I'm like, so all right, so give me your arguments. And then they were giving me arguments that were just blatantly fallacious. It was like, and I'll just be honest with you. It was like one argument was, it was the argument from what is it? I forget the now because it's late. I'm forgetting the words, but it was the word meant this 200 years ago, so it's got to mean this today. That's an obvious fallacy. Words change over time, things like that. Or the argument against synonyms, right? We already have a word for that, so we can't have another word that mean the same thing. I'm like, so we might as well throw out the book of synonyms then. You know what I'm saying? Because these are synonyms. Words can actually have shared meanings. And then the fact that this in philosophy, atheism only meant this. And then you look up, then when you look that up, you see that's actually not true. Atheism, it's the exact opposite of what he says. Atheism actually means a lack of belief in philosophical circles now. And there's actually references that you can see currently. If you read a philosophical paper, atheism is actually understood as a lack of belief. That's current scholarship, modern scholarship. Formerly, Steve may have had an argument, but current scholarship, if you read a paper, this is what they say. So and researching and actually doing the work and looking at his claims and evaluating the claims, then it was like, well, here's the reason why I believe your claims are wrong, and here's the reason why I think that you are mistaken. And it seemed like that was just a bridge too far. It was you could tell, it's like you could tell Steve anything, but if you were actually to break down his argument and show him when he was wrong, then that's where he kind of lost it. And I did a video because then Steve wanted to, and the reason why I actually got kicked out the first time is because Steve came to my channel when I was doing like my, here's what it is. I was doing my, here's what atheism is. Here's why I believe Steve is wrong, and just going through it. And Steve came in and said he wanted to have a conversation, right? He wanted to debate the topic. So I'm like, all right, sure. So we had this 3-hour hangout, and, being a lawyer, I know bad arguments. So when he was making these bad arguments, I just was like, okay, well, let's play it out. And I got him to admit that using his own argument, Rocks would be agnostic, because that was one of his things. If Rocks lack a belief, so Rocks are atheists. Well, I'm like, well, you said agnostics lack a belief, so Rocks are agnostic. And he's like, yeah. So all his arguments, it was easy to blow up, right? They were like stupid arguments. But so then I put the video out showing how his arguments were bad arguments. And that was the last straw. That's when he just kicked me out, because he just couldn't handle the pushback, because he felt that his argument was this thing that was it was his Einstein's, it was his theory of relativity, and I was challenging the theory of relativity, Steve's theory of relativity. That's what it was.
No, you're right. And Holy Spackle said this. I was a mod then. It was such bullshit. The mods were like, why are you kicking Nate? Nate's a troll. And I've seen that, in my, I don't know, whatever this is, investigation. Steve tends to, that's like his catch-all for anyone that's disingenuous. I was talking to Kyle about this earlier, and Batsy. I was talking about this to Batsy too. Steve is obsessed with his own morality and proclaiming his morality and proclaiming his ethics and showing that he's justified, that he's morally justified. Well, unless you're a complete and utter psychopath, you always believe that all your decisions you make are morally justified. That's why we base laws on ethics and not morals in our society, because you can morally justify anything. You can't ethically justify anything, but you can morally justify anything. I think that it's his religious upbringing that causes this this need for moral validation. What do you think is the genesis of that? Genesis.
I think Steve and for the great debate, I think Steve had a great idea. I think he had a great action plan, but I think Steve missed. I think Steve was one of those guys. Is that yes? I'm using a sock. I forgot somebody said I'm using a sock to wipe my sweat. Yes, true. This is my sock. But one thing, Steve was one of those guys who were the smartest guy in the room until a guy with a degree came in, right, about the topic. Then all of a sudden he wasn't the smartest guy in the room. And Steve is a person that can talk to, a PhD and that type of thing and he can hold his own. But the problem is, I think he had a problem himself with being it's like almost the imposter syndrome, right? He wants to be the PhD without actually going to school and getting the PhD. That's why he was trying to test out that whole going to nuke school and being a janitor is the same as having a PhD, that type of thing. Because I think he was so entrenched in trying to be equals instead of just trying to be himself, and that I think is a thing that Steve is always trying to prove that he's a smart guy, right, not knowing that everybody already thinks he is a smart guy. He doesn't have to prove anything to anybody. He is a smart guy, right? And I think that's the problem. He's always fearing to be found out. But Steve, we already know who you are. There's just nothing to find out. You know what I mean? That type of thing.
No, and I agree with you. And I was saying that to Batsy earlier. We were driving around doing some stuff, and I said, I think that the biggest issue he has is if somebody not even necessarily disagrees with him, but if somebody calls him out on something they feel is immoral and says you were immoral when you made this decision, he's anti them forever and anti them on everything. The other night, he couldn't believe that I agreed with him on the case. I was making it up. I was lying. I was an idiot because I can sit here as a normal person and agree with people on things and still feel that in some cases they are morally unjustified or ethically unjustified. I used to have a boss who every single day would talk about how evil Obama was. And she would say things like, I hope something bad happens to him. Or, I hope that, I hope that the lies he tells or the things that he does are shown. Like, she was just super anti-Obama, super anti-leftist. But I still reported to her and I still completed the projects that I had to complete. And I was still civil to her and friendly to her in conversation because I can compartmentalize. And Steve talks a lot about the compartmentalizing of morality. And you shouldn't compartmentalize morality. And I'd just like to get your thoughts on compartmentalizing of morality.
I don't know. I'm thinking about it. I don't know. I think it's fluid. It's one of those things that it's really from event to event. There is no kind of just universal standard. I'm thinking for each event has to be judged on its own, right? And I think we here online have to be a little hyper. I don't want to say vigilant, but we're hyper. It's both hypersensitive and we like to use hyperbolic language in referencing things. So things that, like, for instance, like he was talking to you, doing a show at Kyle is now immoral. That's, that obviously that's not, what I'm saying. And then he can do a show on his channel. What was the show that you had referenced it there about hypocrisy and right. Cancel culture. And it's so in one instance, he's against cancel culture. He's against this, like when he had Warren on, he kept saying, guilt by association. I shouldn't be guilt by association. But then on the back end, that's exactly what he did to you. You had Kyle on your show, so guess what? Guilt by association. Now you support him still at 60,000. And that's the thing that got him in trouble with Katie Joy. So I think when Steve talks about morality, he's just talking about it from a perspective of whatever suits him best. If the moral thing to do is whatever best for Steve in that moment, and immoral is whatever is bad for Steve. And that's what happened, I think, when he had the conversation with you.
Thanks for coming by, Jen. It was good to see you. Yeah, and I think it ties into, because what I want to get into is the brass tacks document. Did you add to the brass tacks document? Were you?
No, I didn't, but I read it though. I read it, and
Sure.
I agreed with it. Yeah, I remember when it came out.
Right. So for those who don't know, the brass tacks document was written in late 2017 by a bunch of members of the Great Debate community, and it was a list of things that they would like to see happen in the Great Debate community. And a lot of it was about Steve, because Steve had assumed this leadership ownership position, especially the G+ page. But other parts of it were just about the GDC as a whole. In your opinion of where the GDC was at the time, do you think that the brass tacks document would have helped if it was followed?
The issue, yes, I think the brass tacks document was. It really could have just been down to one sentence. Is the Great Debate community, is it a community or is it Steve's business? That's essentially what that document came down to. Is this, is it going to be Steve that just runs everything, or do we really have a democracy here? Do we really have some oversight? Because the problem was Steve. The problem was Steve not. He wanted ultimate control. He wanted to be able to more or less make his cult. This is when it started coming into the cult. Agree with me or you're out. And most people are like, no, this debate community is about disagreement. It's about getting the people in who don't agree with you. So we don't want this type of groupthink. You have to be right. And the people who don't think you're right should be able to express that they don't think you're right. And that's kind of the brass tacks document was kind of saying that without saying that, and without saying that you're being you're manipulating the power that you have. And at the end of the day, the reason why I think all the people who eventually left the Great Debate community and left Steve was because Steve at that point said, I'm going to take this and it's mine. That he says, I am the owner. I am this. It's my Great Debate community. And the people you're talking about, Holy Spackle, myself, Dragnot, and all the people who left it now who are in Dragnot, Alex Malpass, Ozzy, all these people who Steve are all in Dragnot Discord, because that is the great debate community was never this, this thing that Steve created. It was just the people. It was the people. And he doesn't have that now. He has a smaller following with his core group, but he doesn't have the great debate community. That's still that's still Spackle, that's still Drag, that's still Sam, that's still all those people. Because all those people, we still talk, we still do that stuff. It's not, you know what I mean?
Sure.
That's
do.
Not dead.
I mean, it was awesome to me. I just came into this community a little over a year ago. I'm still learning about it. It was awesome to me to somebody said, well, Agent of Doubt coined the term Great Debate Community in 2012. I'm like, oh, okay. And a few weeks later, I joined Drag Server, and Agent of Doubt is there. And so to me, that's like a really cool tie-in. I love history. I love knowing the ins and outs of things that happened as they happened. And I think it continues with the content that all of you do. I mean, Drag and G-Man, how long have Drag and G-Man been going at each other now? 7 years? Is that right?
Yeah, it's been a long time. It's been a long time.
So, you've got
Did we lose you?
Go ahead.
No, you're breaking up a little bit.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is that better? Is it better now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
I don't know if it's me or you, but it seems like you're breaking up a little bit. Go ahead. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. Let me do this. This should help. There we go. Yeah. So I think, for those of us that are here today, that are coming into the community, and seeing how it's kind of fragmented but still together. What advice do you have for somebody, for people like us who are into debate, that are into these discussions, in order to have them constructively and productively?
Well, I think you can still have those discussions. I think you have your server, Drag Server. I think there are places to have those discussions. But I think now those discussions are kind of had in this microcosm, because now it's us versus them. There was, and there always. I think to say this fairly, I think there always has to be an antagonist to the story. And I think at first with the Great Debate Community, it was the Clown Core Posse. I don't know if you've ever heard that term, but that was like the theists who were crazy and who were saying all that stuff. So we called them the Clown Core Posse, and that was all of us versus them. And now, it's us versus us. Because Steve was us. Reds was us. So now it's us versus us, and I think that now is the antithesis here. And those now instead of having the conversations about things that we disagree with in theology and just in regular politics or whatever, it's now about character issues. This person's a blank apologist, this person's this. And I think that's the thing that suffered the most with our community, is that we've lost the conversation. Like, when was the last time we've heard a really good debate about the argument for God? Great. I think some channels have started to have that again, but I'm saying, like we used to have hangouts for hours.
I've watched them. I've watched a lot of them to prepare for this, and they were fascinating. The entire way through, it was fantastic.
Yeah, but we don't do that anymore, and I think that's lost, because I think part of it is that drama sells too. The drama of the lawsuits and all that stuff sells. But I think now it just is that there's just nobody doing it. Everybody is in this us versus them mentality, looking for the next drama. It's almost like reality TV. But I think we forgot the mission. The mission was to educate ourselves, to challenge our ideas, and to grow mentally. And I think now it's almost to seek and destroy a little bit.
Yeah, and it makes me sad. Like, I don't want to be on this attack vector. I'm not looking for it. I think that Steve believes that the reason that I am doing a show with Kyle is to hurt him. And like, I would be doing a show with Kyle, or want to do a show with Kyle, if Steve McRae didn't exist, because I just enjoy creating content with Kyle, and I think it's fun. We have a fun time doing a show together. And I hate that I've gotten to sit here and talk to you for almost an hour, and it's been so much about Steve, because I want this to be more about you. But unfortunately, your history with the GDC is so intimately intertwined with Steve's history because of the way that you were forcibly removed from the community and kind of isolated. What was that like, to be isolated like that?
Well, to be honest with you, it really was. It was kind of like a 5-second thing. I was kicked off the G Plus page, and the next thing I know, I was just getting messages from everybody. Yo, this is messed up. Yo, and then people started leaving en masse behind it because everyone knows. We just had a silly argument, and it was the straw that I think that broke the camel's back because people thought, because it was kind of like, well, if he could just do this to Nate. When Nate, everybody loves me, you know what I'm saying? And it was kind of like, well, if you can do this to Nate just because he disagreed with you, who couldn't he do this to? So it was kind of that kind of show that's like, hold on, is this community, are we losing the community? So it became that type of thing. So I was really never like isolated. It just started, I think a lot of eyes were opened at that particular time. And I think the next catalyst to the event was then the funeral of Jade. I think that then really splintered the group in two parts. So my experience, it was because, don't forget, me and Steve, we argued after that point. We hated each other, and I say this to people all the time. One time we had got so low where me and Steve hated each other, and then I had done a stream and we were talking about it, and me and Steve were really close friends back before that the war happened, and Steve had knew that like my parents had been crackheads back in the 90s and this, and Steve had said something about that Nate must be on crack, right? So he found it. He actually reached out to me. He reached out to me straight up and said, "Hey Nate, I know your history and I know this, and I'm sorry that I said that." Even though we were at war at that time, he reached out and said, "I'm sorry I said that because I know your history, and I didn't want you to think that I was saying that because I know your history. I just wanted you to, it was just something that slipped out." Sure. And I thought that was really nice that he came out, because again, we hated each other, so he came out. So that's the type of relationship that I had, because we had good times, we had bad times, and now it's just bad all the time. But that was the kind of relationship I had with Steve. And it's interesting because my relationship with Steve, it was great, but then it also caused me to have great relationships with other people. Like my relationship with Drag became great because in that whole GDC piece, Drag was like, for me, Dragnot was like the person, if you wanted to get something done and you really wanted to really figure out things, you went to Drag. If you wanted to just to talk shit, you went to Steve. So it was like, it was like on those two tracks. I don't know if everybody else kind of understood it that way, but it was kind of like these two tracks. If you wanted to have a little bit more fun, be a little more outgoing, and meet new people, Drag was kind of really put you in that way. And if you really wanted to kind of promote yourself and try to get into, then you went to Steve. So that's kind of how it played out for me.
Athena, Goddess of Wisdom and Warfare, sends a $2 super chat. Thank you, Athena, and says, I was there during the GDC Exodus. Can you talk a little bit about that Exodus, kind of expand upon that a little bit? Like, what preceded, how did it start? What happened? And then what happened right after?
Well, there was the first Exodus when he had kicked me out. Then there was the second Exodus after the Brass Tacks document came out. And then him and Sam, because he always hated Sam the scientist. And then it just became just the whole thing with like, hey, listen, we don't want, because at a point people just became afraid to give their opinion in the community if it contradicted with Steve. So then it was just like nobody wanted to do that, and Steve was blocking people en masse, like he's doing now on Twitter. He started blocking people en masse. And so people were just like, so then people just started leaving and exodusing the great debate community. And because it just didn't make any sense. And then people were questioning, well, if you have these channels monetized, but you have all of us doing all these shows on the channel, where's that money going? And Steve was like, I'm only getting 15 cents or something every month, which was like, okay, but there's a revenue sharing piece of it. You have 20 creators creating all this content for this one channel, and you're not sharing the love. You know what I mean? It just started to seem like he was taking advantage, and I don't know if it's interesting. I don't know at the end, after the Exodus happened. I think the bigger piece of it happened after Jade's funeral and the TST thing happened. Then it was just like, because I think at that point it kind of exposed who Steve was, and then it kind of exposed who kind of Red was in that moment, and then people understood that this is how they always were. You know, a lot of people, when it came to Steve and Reds, they believed that this was like, you know, a lot of people kept saying, you know, I didn't know this person. How could they do this? How, you know, I didn't know who Red's rhetoric was. You know, I didn't know that Steve was like this. But I think people then eventually had to come to the realization they were always like this. It was just like when you're friends with somebody, you don't see their flaws. But then when you step back, then you see, okay, this person didn't change. This person was just that asshole. There's always been that asshole, except I like that asshole, and now I'm on the wrong end of it.
Marcy says, why was Steve given so much power over the community? What are your thoughts on that?
It was because he organized it. Steve was able to put the work in. He put the work in to create the page. He put the work in. He made the phone calls to get people together. He was the one that set up the structure. He was the one, you know, it was that type of thing. Steve saw the money, the opportunity, and all that stuff, where everybody else just saw the conversations. So you know, he was on the wave. He knew how to ride the wave and to start and to monetize this, because that's what Steve's goal was. Steve's goal was always to monetize the conversations so he can make money. He tried to do that with his own channel. He tried to do it with the GDC, and then he hit the lottery with Non Sequitur. But that was always his plan, and he wasn't shy about it. He made sure that we all knew that was his plan.
Yeah, he for those that don't know, in the description of the YouTube videos, he would put the link to his Patreon. And big thing in the brass tacks document was, okay, maybe we put the links to the Patreons of everybody that appears in that video. Or maybe we just don't do that at all. Maybe there just aren't Patreon links. He was very resistant to that. Very resistant to that.
Well, just to show you, it was interesting because Steve, at that point, I was at a part in that piece when I first started. I was actually a professor at law school, so I was making a 6-figure salary. I was doing well, and sure. So the YouTube channel, like if you go to some of my earliest video on my channel, you'll see Steve's Patreon and stuff in my video description. Why? Because I know he was a guy making $400 a month living in a 6x6 room. So I was like, hey, if this can make any money for him and get him some Patreon, sure. You know, it didn't matter to me at that particular point. And again, I don't think anybody can honestly say Steve was ever deceptive about his end goal. His end goal was to make money and make this thing a money maker. And that's what he's trying to do now.
Quentin Phipps Random Ginger says, it's sad to see how far Steve has fallen. It was because of him I met all the people I talked to in Discord and on YouTube. So now when people saw you say you talked to Steve, I'm sad. Yeah, and I think, you know, that makes me sad a little bit because when I first joined the community, I was able to go onto his what were they called? The after shows after the non-sequitur show. I go on there sometime. And you know, I got to meet a lot of people because of that. I didn't really do anything for my channel. Like Steve he said the other night that my channel started on his channel, which is not true. It started on Godless Engineer's channel. That's where I got a lot of my early subs from. But I was able to meet people. And what was important to me, because Batsy would say, you know, oh, why are you hanging out with that guy? Like, he seems creepy. I don't like him. And I said, well, it's important to me, if I'm going to do a political channel, to be out in front of people that disagree with me. Because if I just start a channel that's an echo chamber, that's boring. Like, I'm going to get on and do a YouTube video every week about how great it is to be a progressive and how wonderful I am. Or, you know, like, well, that's boring. You know, I want people to challenge my ideas. I want people to debate with. Because I want to make sure that my convictions are strong, A, and B, maybe I can change some minds. Maybe I can open people up to ideas they haven't had before. And I was able to do that there. In fact, well, I don't want to tell that story. I was going to tell a story, but I'm not going to. I'll tell it some other time. But I was able to do that. So in that channel, I was able to find people that I disagreed with, that had different ideas than me, and we could have a discourse. What do you think about that level of confrontation on that level? Why do you think that creates such a strong conviction inside oneself to be challenged, to have your ideas challenged?
Well, I think at a base level, we're in a community of, I'll say, people who have either personally had to overcome one of the biggest challenge, one of the biggest things, and that's religion, right? Most of the people who are in this community were former religious or maybe even struggling with it now. And the only way you kind of get over that is to having those fundamental things challenged, those fundamental beliefs challenged, some of the most, private and sacred beliefs in our society. And I think being an atheist and being in this community forces you to kind of humble yourself to the fact that you could be wrong. You could be wrong, and to understand that it's okay. It's okay not to know the answer. It's okay not to know the answer. But I think when it comes to just the great debate community, the issue is when you couldn't say someone was wrong. When you couldn't tell someone you're wrong. It was just like being in the church and not being hearing a priest make the sermon, and you couldn't, it was a one-way conversation. They can tell you you're wrong, but you couldn't tell them why you thought they were wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, it's sad. It's sad that they've created that bubble for themselves, because it's kind of like a jail. It's like a prison, that you construct around yourself. And you'll get stuck in there forever if you stay too long. Learning Suge says, great convo. Nate's awesome. Take care. Since $10 super chat. Suge, thank you very much. Glad to see you, man.
Oh, yeah. Suge is my boy. Suge, what's going on, bro?
Absolutely. Yeah. So is there anything that I didn't ask you about the great debate community that you want to talk about?
I do want to say this. I do feel responsible for I think the snowball effect. Like, it started very slowly and then it kind of built up. But I think I was a catalyst to just the problem, because I'll say this, and I always say this: Dragnot knew early on that there was something wrong with Steve, and he knew it, and he called it, and it was just like this guy just had a crystal ball, because he knew. It's like he just I don't know how to explain it, but when someone just like calls it, he just called it. He knew Steve was a bad, and he said, this guy's gonna flip, this guy's gonna do this. And I was like, and I kept saying to myself, how did he predict all that? And he predicted every single time. And I remember when he left Steve, he was like, I'm never going back, because this guy, you'll see, he's just gonna get worse, and it's just gonna get worse. And it just happened. And I never understood how he was able to call it out. But I always find myself finding that the great debate community as we knew it, that will never happen again. It was one of those things that 3-4 years ago, it was a great opportunity to just come and just have a conversation with like a Bill Ludlow, like a myself. Don't forget, I was a teaching law school students. I was a professor at a law school, and I was having conversations with people, with just regular people, about the law. It was like, when would you even have access to that resource? Right. I was having like when I wanted to talk about theology, it was with Alex Malpass. He's written papers about this stuff, and I spoke with Draper, and I spoke with Ozzy. So it was a time in which it was about the argument. It was about the argument, and now it's just not about the argument. And I keep saying it again. When have we actually heard arguments in the fields that we're in? You do more political stuff, but for the religious stuff, nobody's making those arguments anymore. And I think that's what's suffering in our community. It's suffering because the arguments have just gone away. It's now about the individuals on the other side of the camera.
Yeah, I agree with you. I love talking about political issues and social issues because they're so important to me. Because the things that have happened to me personally, or things in society I want to see change, that sort of thing. But it would be interesting to me to sit down and have a conversation about my polytheism, about my paganism with an atheist. We might be setting something like that up, actually. But those kinds of conversations aren't happening. Like, as a pagan, who do I go talk to? That it just doesn't, like, I'm not going to go on Modern Day Debate and like have a big structured debate with, I don't know, T-Jump or something about how I'm a pagan. This wasn't. What's missing about the great debate community is that it wasn't always a big event that everyone needed to come and pay attention to and hear. It was just, I'm going to go have a conversation with some people about some things, and maybe I'll learn something, and maybe they'll learn something. a way to hang out, and now it's become an event. Every time there has to be a debate, has to be a giant event that everyone pays attention to.
It was. I don't know if you've ever heard of the Nadia Hangouts. It was kind of the Nadia Hangouts, and you know, it was funny because I remember when all this was new and people were just having the 8-hour hangouts and things of that nature. It was I don't know. It was just a different type of environment. I always used to say we were like the stupidest people because we record every conversation and hold everybody. You know, it's like a permanent record of everything that everybody ever said. But nobody looks to those conversations anymore. And I think now we're at the point. Where we're kind of looking for that space in which to have conversations. I think modern day debate, modern day debate to me is just an extension of the non sequitur show. It was a non sequitur show before when the non sequitur show imploded. Modern day debate filled the vacuum, so that was the vacuum filler. But we haven't had. I think we need a space where we still kind of have that open dialogue where anybody can jump in and have a conversation. But then we have to. I think we have to do it where it's kind of like this. Like we'd have to just open up a StreamYard or something. It's going to take time. It's going to take effort. It's going to take the person who's just going to be able to be there to moderate these things for 8-10 hours. I know, MK had the time. Nadia had the time. There were a couple. At a point, there was, but nobody can do that now. So I think that's what's just missing. It's just missing a time where we don't have conversations like this. We have 10 people in the room and just start talking about crap. That's what this is missing. Yeah,
and Omar Rose Moon says there were people there for blood sports. It wasn't all roses. I didn't mean to sugarcoat it. Yeah. It just meant, now a debate is an event, and back then you could just sit down and have a debate with somebody. That it was just what you did for fun. Yeah.
Like I can tell you some great things. Like I remember one time I was in a debate with G-Man, Darth Dawkins, like all these Christians, right? These Christians that hate atheists. And then I asked the question, who here is a true Christian? And lo and behold, Darth Dawkins was able to prove that no one else except him was a true Christian in the room. So I was like,
of course he did.
Yeah. So, but just things like that, you just don't see anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes me sad. Nate Brody's lamp says, I'm a lamp. I'm not required to wear a mask.
That's true. But, we are social distancing. So, you're less than 6 feet. So I'm sorry. It's the law. You're
just not going to be able to reach. It sucks. Anyway, Nate, thank you for being here, my friend. I really enjoyed talking with you tonight.
Oh, no, thanks for having me. This was fun. I feel bad because to let the experience of the great debate community to be in a 1-hour conversation, it's just really it cheapens the experience because I'll say this. I've met some of the, like, when we all came together and did the New York trip, I didn't know any of these people. I remember when I pulled up in my car and, I was like, oh my God, there's like, is this black guy Nate? And I was like, give me your wallet, and I see Dragnod, you see Hannah, and you see Red's Rhetoric, and we all went out. It was a simpler time. It was such a simpler time. Us drinking together, us doing these streams. And again, it was, like, we made mistakes. We all made mistakes. But we were able to accept those mistakes and accept everybody who asked who they were. And I think whenever you try to monetize that type of community, that's when it becomes what it has become. And I think that may have been a problem. Maybe it just wasn't done correctly. But the community is still here. We are still here. The great debate community, all those people are still here. It's just now we're having those conversations in different places. And I hope that's what comes across here. That community is not gone. It's just now in a different form. It's now on Discord than it was on Google Hangouts. So,
no, I totally agree.
But thanks for having me. I really appreciate it, bro.
Absolutely. No, anytime. We'll have to do some other stuff too together. But thank you. I want to say thank you to the live chat. We had a lot of people here tonight. I want to thank you all for being here. Excellent comments, and I appreciate you all. I'm going to go see if I can fix my computer. Hopefully it's not dead forever. I'm very, very scared right now that my laptop's dead. But thank you guys for being here, and thank you, Nate, and we'll see you guys next time. Have a great night, everybody.
Peace.